So now I want to show you something that may be useful, and I'm hoping tomorrow to do a lecture on logic modeling, which will include a little bit of this, which may be useful to you as you start deciding if you are here and need to go here, right? Or if you're here and need to go to this, right? So you have to figure out where you would need to be. But I want to show you a piece that was actually done for, let's see, here it is, for the integrated theory and practice class I teach, which is for integrated folks. It's the first part of that two-part sequence for you, right? But this is an example because they're refining some of the skills they learned in OCP of how these problem and goal statements get broken down to where you can really grab onto them to a greater degree, all right? I also want to warn you that this looks really pretty because this student worked really hard on this and it took a while. So if you're like, I can't do something like that out of the gate, you're right, you can't. You write it and you work with it and I can help and all that kind of thing. So don't get intimidated, all right? So I'm gonna show you this. Okay, so this student, and I won't go into more background about this because we don't have the time, but this student started out with a case vignette and then she crafted you know, some ideas about what the client system was. In this case, we can also call it the benefit community. And then she looked at what the problem was, and she really refined what is the problem for these folks that I'm encountering, and then what would be the goal. So this particular student started with, there aren't the services to work with pregnant and parenting teens, right? There's a lack of services, there's a lack of outreach, there's a lack of assistance. But really, it's not the lack of service that is the problem. It's kind of like if you have had a chance, or if you will look at the lecture I did about healthy communities equal healthy people, the lack of aspirin is not what makes people sick, right? There are things happening that make people sick, and then they might need aspirin. So we don't want to frame things as a lack of service necessarily. We want to look at what the problem is. So here's what the problem is as she arrived in conversation and work that we did. Pregnant and parenting teens who are living in poverty in Muscatine, Iowa. So you can see that she's got that very well focused, right? It's just these kids, and they are kids, who are living in poverty. So that's another further focus in Muscatine, Iowa. Very specific. I'm not suggesting that each of you drill down to where it's like, you know, in this precinct, you know, in this 1 mile block, you know, 1 mile square block or anything. Not quite like that, but she gave this focus here, are unsupported when trying to deal with serious issues such as mental health, domestic violence, housing, hunger, and transportation. Because that's what she was seeing in her work in the schools. That she has these young people who have these multiple issues, right? And that's what they're encountering. Now, she had some other material there about what the outcomes of those things were, you know, like dropping out of school and like bad outcomes for their children and, you know, other things to support why this is a bad idea. The goal then, in this case, is that pregnant and parenting teens who are living in poverty in Muscatine, Iowa, so again, the same kids, are able to navigate systems and develop their own plans of action to be successful even when they're dealing with multiple and serious issues, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the reason that's important, even though it might seem kind of vague, is that it leaves a lot of room for various interventions to be in play. So it could be that a funder is like, I'm going to pick up on that word navigate, right? And so I'm going to hire a navigator. But we don't want to say the problem is they don't have a navigator. That's not the problem. Or it could be that somebody says, you know what I think really, based on what these teenagers are telling me, is they want to be creating their own plans. So maybe what we do is we work with them in a consciousness raising group where they can exercise, you know, that praxis model of what information do I need, how do I get it, where do I want to go with my life? And so we support them in that. Maybe what we do is we say, is there something that can be done taking one of these major and debilitating issues out of the mix? How does life change if you're not dealing, with having to worry about housing all the time? Or which of these can be components in that? So I share that with you because it's about targeting the work that needs to be done and seeing what the problem is and what the goal could be, again, in person-specific terms. And as I said, I'll be sharing a step-by-step lecture with you all about that. So that's coming tomorrow, and that'll be maybe useful for these next phases, but there are ways to think about these things. Does that make sense? The problem is not the aspirin, the problem is the illness, right? And what's causing that. Okay. Questions about that? That's just a thought to move you to the next phase. Just to beat that into the earth. If I'm thinking about the Latinx group, for example, maybe the issue is that certain kinds of work, part of the issue is that certain kinds of work are not seen as honorable or valuable, right? When you're talking about tracking. Is that part of the issue? Whatever. Anyway, that's for another day. It's 8 o'clock. It's 8:09. All right. What I want to do is I want to split you into your group so you have some time to work together talking about how did this go? And what do you want to change, if anything? What do you want to notch up? What do you want to reconnect on for the next phase of the work? So why don't you all take like a 2-minute stretch break, giving me time to put you in your breakout rooms, all right? And then come back and be ready to reflect and focus together.